special meeting of the City Council, Monday, June 6, 2022. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, would you read the roll, call the roll, please?
Certainly. Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez.
Here.
Councilmember Friedman.
Here.
Councilmember Sneddon, not yet present. Mayor Pro Tem Harmon.
Here.
Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez.
Present.
Councilmember Jordan.
Here.
And Mayor Russ.
Here. And you have an item to read.
Item 1, proposal for implementation of recommendations from the Community Formation Commission.
Thank you very much. And Sanderson, are you taking the lead on this? Would you proceed, please?
Good afternoon, Mayor Rouse and members of the City Council. I'm Barbara Anderson, Senior Assistant to the City Administrator, and I'm joined this afternoon by Assistant City Attorney John Doimus. We are here as a follow-up to the April 22nd special meeting when the Community Formation Commission presented their final report and recommendations for civilian oversight of the Santa Barbara Police Department. The City Administrator's Office will be presenting a proposal from city staff that we believe wholeheartedly honors the intent of these recommendations and thoughtfully advances implementation within existing civilian oversight mechanisms and current personnel. For background, in 2020, the City Council established the Community Formation Commission to guide the creation of a civilian oversight system. The members of the CFC spent countless hours not only understanding the current policies and processes that the Santa Barbara Police Department has in place, but also the emerging field of civilian oversight, including lessons learned and best practices from other cities. There was thoughtful dialogue and discourse during every meeting, supported by several staff members, including a liaison from the City Attorney's Office, as well as a liaison from the Police Department, and consultation from the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, as well as the Center for Court Innovation. We are beyond grateful to these community leaders for committing their time and passion to this purpose. In April of this year, the Commission shared its recommendations to the City Council to create a civilian oversight system in the City of Santa Barbara. An overwhelming number of these recommendations are supported by both the City Administrator's Office and the Police Department. The following proposal not only honors the intent of the CFC's recommendations, but it will implement the majority of them through existing and enhanced infrastructure. In its final report, the CFC recommended the creation of a civilian oversight board and outlined in specific detail the duties and authorities that should be assigned to this board. Given that the majority of these duties are already assigned to and within the purview of the Fire and Police Commission, and to move forward in a timelier manner than creating an entirely new oversight body, we are proposing that the authority of the Fire and Police Commission be enhanced by ordinance to include the duties and authorities recommended by the CFC. We also support taking the steps to elevate the Commission's standing in the community by facilitating meetings in council chambers, televised to the public, and increasing the frequency of how often the Commission meets to manage a larger workload. The Fire and Police Commission currently has 2 openings. One is a temporary position to be filled during the current City Advisory Group recruitment process, and their term will end in December. So 2 positions will be appointed during the next cycle in the fall. It is in the purview of a City Council to select commissioners that align with the very detailed recommendations from the CFC. Additionally, there is a recommendation to expand the number of members from 5 to 7 that the council can consider as a charter amendment to be put before the electorate in 2024. Of the 12 total recommendations regarding the duties and authorities of a civilian oversight board, 10 can be implemented per this proposal. 2 others cannot be implemented due to existing legal barriers. This includes performance evaluation and termination of personnel. In regards to the specific duties being proposed for the Fire and Police Commission, in alignment with the recommendations from the CFC, the Commission can determine annual training standards for members in conjunction with the City Administrator's Office and the Police Department. The Commission, City Administrator's Office, and Police Department can also collaborate on providing alternative, accessible, and independent methods for receiving complaints concerning police misconduct. Chief Malikian has already had conversations about the possibility of partnering with the library and the Franklin Center for this purpose. The Commission can also facilitate the ongoing review of police policy and procedure in coordination with the Chief of Police, ensuring that procedures reflect current best practices. We also recommend that the Commission be responsible for providing a venue for the discussion of events of significant public interest, where the community can express their questions and concerns. Such a forum would also allow the police department to explain the actions of the department to the public. The Community Formation Commission specifies 10 duties and authorities for an independent police monitor in carrying out the day-to-day responsibilities of the civilian oversight mechanism in a way that ensures procedural justice for all involved parties. The city administrator, Ms. Bjork, has assigning these duties to the senior assistant to the city administrator as part of my job responsibilities, as well as through my role in providing additional staff support to the Fire and Police Commission. More specifically, my position will serve in the monitoring function for at least the next 2 years. This position would be responsible for oversight-related activities, liaison with the police department, and liaison with the Fire and Police Commission. This will assist us in determining actual workload requirements, and we can then make adjustments if needed. The City Administrator's Office will review all complaints concerning police misconduct and ensure that those complaints are investigated appropriately, either in coordination with the police department or by a contracted third party. As such, we'll collaborate with the police chief and the Fire and Police Commission on identifying categories of alleged misconduct that should be referred to an outside entity for investigation. The City Administrator's Office will also assist in formalizing a reporting schedule with the Fire and Police Commission for the police chief to brief the commission on the complaints process and if any proposed changes in department policies and procedures. We will report back to council on an annual basis as to the work accomplished, as well as an evaluation about the need for additional capacity if necessary within the auditor-monitor element. Most importantly, we are committed to ongoing collaboration with former members of the CFC, as well as the broader community throughout the development and implementation of these processes. Lastly, to assist in identifying areas of improvement for the police department, staff is recommending the pursuit of a contract with the Office of Independent Review to conduct a strategic audit, of the police department. The contract will be executed and project managed through the City Administrator's Office, and Chief Malikian has committed full access to personnel as well as all documentation that is needed to conduct the audit. We are proposing that the contract for the audit be funded by the use of general fund appropriated reserves and allocated in the City Administrator's Office fiscal year 2022 operating budget. The audit would focus on 5 specific areas: a review of the police department's complaint process, the need for executive development and leadership training, employee retention and recruiting, use of force training and review, and general policy compliance. One of the main goals for the OIR audit is to provide a roadmap for determining future areas of review or auditing in order to implement necessary change for the betterment of the police department and our community. So this afternoon, the recommendation from staff is that council direct that responsibility for oversight duties of the police department remain and are enhanced with the Fire and Police Commission, and draft ordinance language to be provided by the City Attorney's Office. Direct that monitoring responsibilities related to the police department be placed within the City Administrator's Office, and approve a contract with the Office of Independent Review for a strategic analysis of the police department with costs not to exceed $50,000. The recommendation as drafted would be implementing a level of civilian oversight of the police department that the City of Santa Barbara has never experienced before, in a manner that is more proactive, not reactive, and still provides the opportunity to learn and evolve as we continue to receive more input from the community. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Mr. Doimus and Chief Malikian are also available to answer questions and address any points that need clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Okay, questions from the council. We'll start with Ms. Harmon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Just a couple of questions. First, so you mentioned that when you receive complaints, there will be, the city administrator's office will determine whether they meet a threshold to go to external investigation. Can you talk about how you'll make that determination, whether there'll be a public process as to the threshold for going to independent investigation? Just a little bit more color on that for me, please.
And John, do you want to answer that? Yeah.
Sure. Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Harmon, it wouldn't change much we already do. We have an internal affairs department, obviously, professional standards, and we've looked at when we need to go outside investigation, if there are conflict issues, for example, and it's a case-by-case basis. If, you know, the position involved is really high up where it makes it difficult for someone internally to look at that, you know, and also for appearances of bias. So it's a case-by-case situation. Many times we look at it based on the level of the individual involved, and if there isn't someone within the department that can't handle it, or if the issue is very serious in nature where it would be advisable to go outside. And that's done in consultation with the police department management, the city attorney's office, and now with this new position that's being created.
Thank you. So I understand that there is a certain degree of specificity based on the situation or context, but is this something that could be standardized such that maybe we could work with the Fire and Police Commission to develop a set of standards as to when complaints rise to the level of requiring an outside review? I would love, and I will not get into comments, but I think this is something to me that seems like would really benefit from public process. And I'm wondering if you've thought about bringing that to the Fire and Police Commission as well, if this is the direction we go.
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Hardeman, you know, like I said, it was a case-by-case basis. There is a potential where it could be standardized. You know, in the past 10 years, we've gone twice to outside, again, more based on level of position and conflicts. So it's bare minimum. Generally, our department would handle internal affairs if it doesn't rise to that. So that's something we can definitely look at to see what other jurisdictions have done when they've gone outside to that. But like I said, it's a very small subset of investigations that we've, you know, seen the need to go outside based on, again, avoiding any potential conflicts or the level. And, you know, part of that is because it's costly. They run to 30, 60,000, but when we need to do it, we definitely do it for sure.
Thank you. Yeah, I certainly understand that and very much trust your judgment, but I think from another perspective, one might think that the reason there are so few outside investigations is because there has not been a clear standardized framework for determining when those outside investigations are required. And then just one more quick question related to, let's see, 1 second, let me see where it was. Okay, the audit, thank you. Ms. Anderson, you identified 5 specific areas, and I'm just wondering if, well, maybe more broadly, if you could tell us a little bit more about how this audit came to be part of these recommendations, whether that came from the CFC, whether these 5 specific issue areas were developed as areas for audit in connection or in consultation with the CFC, just sort of how this came, because an audit almost to me seems slightly ancillary to what we're specifically talking about today. So if you could just give me a little more color on that. Thank
Yes,
you.
Mayor Russ and Councilmember Harmon agreed, and actually through several conversations with community stakeholders, there was consensus around this process would have been a little bit more effective and efficient if we started with an audit before the CFC was formed to essentially decide from analysis and data what was needed specifically tailored to our community. So I know we're going back a step, but we felt it was still critically important to have a level of audit of the police department when it comes to the complaint process, as well as the use of force policies and procedures, again, to see do we need to conduct further analysis? Do we need to tailor the structure to respond to what's being revealed in terms of the findings of the audit and be able to incorporate that into the civilian oversight structure? We also wanted to include key priorities of the department in the audit as we make the expense to facilitate a level of an investigation and auditing of this level. And we know that Chief Malikian and the department have these priorities in terms of retention and recruiting at their highest level going into the next fiscal year.
That makes sense. Thank you. Has the CFC weighed in on this audit at all? Just curious.
Their feedback was that it should be more comprehensive, and we felt at this time this actually creates a level of mandate for the new police chief to be able to prioritize the findings of this audit, but also gives the new police chief some leeway to be able to conduct a more comprehensive audit when they're ready.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Gutierrez.
Thank you. This question is for the city attorney. Why is it that that we're going to have this responsibility under the Police and Fire Commission? I know the CFC wanted their own individual commission to be established, so can you give the public a little bit more information of why we're going this route, or you're proposing this route?
Sure, Councilmember Gutierrez. The first is the ability, is the reason we're going this route. The city charter gives broad-based powers to the Fire and Police Commission to basically act as a review board to make recommendations to the city administrator, to the city council, to the chief of police in terms of policies and procedures of the entire department. And that fits into what the CFC was doing. Secondly, any board that we were going to create, the one even that the CFC recommended, would require a change in the ordinance. So what we're also proposing is to provide special, in order to organize and provide guidance to this commission and to, basically codify what this new, I wouldn't say new, but this role that the Fire and Police Commission are going to take would have already been done through an ordinance. So first you have the ability or the power to do this in the Fire and Police Commission because of our charter. Second of all, it would be the same process, codifying an ordinance to go about creating procedures on doing this. That's the second thing. Third thing is it's expedience too, right? We already have a Fire and Police Commission, so it allows us to start implementing these things much quicker now versus having to wait for a period of time. So those are three of the biggest reasons why. We're allowed, the Fire and Police Commission has jurisdiction over this area. We have to codify an ordinance anyway, and we can do one with the Fire and Police Commission being in charge of this review process, and it allows us to start the ground running on it.
I also noticed that under the Fire and Police Commission, the first box talked about develop annual training standards for members. Could the Fire and Police Commission also provide annual training for the police department and how to strengthen their communication with the community? Is that something that the commission can work with the police department?
Sure, Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Gutierrez, absolutely. One way I could see, this is just a hypothetical situation, but it maybe helps answer your question. While the Fire and Police Commission can't see individual complaints, they're going to, in the future, get reports from the police department in terms of citizen complaints, updates, and they can see categories of it. And so let's say we see an increase of categories of behaviors where officers are acting unprofessional. We get a lot of complaints of just discourteous treatment, and we see a rise on that. The Fire and Police Commission can work with the police department and recommendations of how do we decrease this? Do we deal with the low-level things of complaints like this through mediation? Do we send officers to additional training? And then asking for proof of such compliance. So that's one way they can be working on this, by spotting the issue, having a discussion with it, making recommendations, and then seeing those recommendations through.
Thank you. My last question is for the city administrator assistant. Do you have a plan of where these complaint forms are going to go in the community, and who, in those places where the complaint forms are going to go out, is there somebody there that can assist the public to fill those complaint forms?
That has been in process, Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Gutierrez already, but we do want more community engagement and more community input in terms of the accessibility of that complaint process and identifying locations where they can be more available. you're completely on point in terms of the suggestion of making sure that their staff being able to be there to assist individuals in filling out those forms. So it's still very much open, and I would say the Fire and Police Commission, in terms of their membership, as well as former members of the CFC, have all had great suggestions that I think we should be able to move forward on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jordan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could one of you tell me about the, what you're calling the enhancements in the draft ordinance and what the timeline, not the part about the enhancements, but particularly what the timeline will be for completion and implementation of that?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Jordan, in terms of developing the ordinance, the goal for us to do that is, it's a priority project, or we're going to start running. So the goal hopefully is, I know my boss is sitting to the right of me, but the goal is this summer to get an ordinance to bring to the ordinance committee on that.
I would like to add to that, Mayor, members of the council. The ordinance will require extensive civic engagement with the ordinance committee, so I expect it'll take a few times through, and quite a lot of public contact with our office and whomever is interested.
Changing
So
that to-
similar to wireless.
Changing
public
that to
meeting.
fall instead of summer. And is it a fair statement to say that the components of that ordinance, the enhancements and the role of the Fire and Police Commission were not part of the recruitment documents for the current recruitment? Would that be a fair statement?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Jordan, correct, because while this was going on, you know, there wasn't, we didn't formalize this recommendation. So when we had the recommendation, all you had for recruitment documents was the city charter in that language. There was no ordinance yet created, so this will be something significantly new.
And then do you see a role of the current members or any newly appointed members in this through the fall ordinance creation, community outreach, stakeholder stuff?
Sure, Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Jordan, led by Ms. Anderson, I envision, as Mr. Kalan said, significant outreach. You recognize the wireless, something similar where we're meeting with stakeholders. Obviously, fire and police presenting before you would go to ordinance committee, we'd present it to them for their input, the current members on there, as well as, you know, entire public, police department, everyone else on this, to get that, and for the ordinance committee and council to see all the comments and what was taken, what was not taken, and have a thorough discussion. We do come forth. So that'll be the process.
Okay, so bear with me, I'll get to a question here. So Ms. Anderson knows this is coming. So within that context of a change in the role of the commission, these enhancements, the lack of information provided on the current recruitment, and particularly the involvement then in who's on that commission for the next 4 or 5 months working on the ordinance and the community. And as you know, I bristle a little bit when you call that the new one being a temporary one, because historically councils have a problem appointing somebody and then just tossing them off of there when they were an incumbent. What's not a good reason to delay off the appointment of the current vacancy, pick up the one that we know that was too late for the current effort, and just in a couple months be ready to appoint again, but by re-advertising and notifying the community members who might be interested on those enhanced roles? So I'm really just looking for a reason not to do that versus a reason to do it as we're doing it now.
Mayor and council, I think you certainly could do that, and we could certainly work to do a special recruitment. And in fact, I think you also could notify your current incumbents that all positions are being reconsidered if you wanted to completely recomprise your board. And given that you're looking at a substantive addition of work and want to have availability of participants. And should council direct us to do that, that's certainly a path that we could take. It does take a little bit of time to do a recruitment in order to make sure that we get enough notice to people to know to apply, but certainly able to take that on.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sneddon?
Thank you, Mayor Rouse, and thank you for presentation. I have a couple questions, and thank you for briefing us all ahead of time. Also, it really helped frame questions ahead of time. So just on slide 3, just a little bit more detail. So the 10 recommendations that can be implemented under the authority of the Fire and Police Commission, and then the 2 others that cannot be implemented. And if you could clarify for me, those 2 that could not be implemented under Fire and Police Commission could or could not be implemented in another way?
Sure. Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Sneddon, correct, they could not be. The two issues that we had that cannot be implemented at all, regardless of what board was being proposed, was any commission recommending discipline or overseeing discipline anyway. And the second issue is being able to look at the personnel files of any individual personnel files of any officer. And I'll explain the reasons why. First, the charter prohibits the city council to basically make recommendations on discipline or hiring or firing an employee. They can only do 2 employees, the city attorney and city administrator. That power is reserved to the city administrator and who the city administrator chooses to delegate that power to, meaning the chief and down so on. And so because council can't do that, a subsequent subordinate board definitely could not. So they have no ability, no board would have an ability to make any discipline recommendations unless there was a charter amendment. Because of that, no commission can go into closed session to review these personnel files because the only basis they would have to go into closed session would be recommending discipline or something like that. So they can't do it in closed session, and you can't do it in open session because that would be a violation of state law in terms of PITCHIS and Penal Code 832.7, which is the protection of the personnel files of officers. There's a recent case out of Ventura on that where personnel files were put in open and an attachment in a case that was filed a writ, and the court's like, that's a police officer Bill of Rights violation. So because there's no basis to look at it open or closed session, no commission could even look at individual personnel files. Now, with this new position that Ms. Anderson's going to be doing, she has the authority to look at personnel files and meet and consult with the chief. So there is going to be oversight that way in terms of seeing what's going on. And the Fire and Police Commission can get aggregate totals or looking at trends, everything else they can get in terms of what's been occurring. They just can't look at individual situations, and no board could based on our way our charter is written.
And does that include council members as well, or what is our authority to be looking at personnel?
Well, you can while you can recommend discipline, you can't do it for those employees, so that would include council members as well.
Okay, so this would in effect be giving an appointed commission more authority than city council
Correct.
members? Or, okay. I just wanted for myself clear that up. And then the recommendation from the Formation Commission for an independent monitor, that would be fulfilled by?
Yes, Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Sneddon, we are looking to take on the duties and authorities within my role, which is Senior Assistant to the City Administrator. So still residing in the City Administrator's office, still independent from the Police Department, working in collaboration, having access to a level of detail and information that I would as an individual manager versus an oversight body. And again, being able to staff support, additional level of staff support, to the Fire and Police Commission.
Thank you. And that would be considered one of the 10 recommendations, but it's in a slightly different way than was originally recommended. But the independent monitor is a thing. It's just not structured exactly in the way recommended.
And Councilmember Sneddon, all 10 duties and authorities that are recommended and specifically detailed in the CFC final report were able to include as responsibilities in my position.
Thank you. And then was this recommendation, as it's laid out to us, was this brought to the Formation Commission to consider?
Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Steinman, we've all had individual conversations with members of the Community Formation Commission in different capacities, but not in formality because the CFC has dissolved as a commission.
Okay. So I'm just a little bit, I just share an impression that I have, that I think there may be sort of a misalignment of what, well, I don't know, and sort of what the Formation Commission charge was and then what it's turning out into. And while I'm supportive of this format, I think, and maybe help me here, that it seemed to me the Formation Commission was really concerned with personnel issues and not spending as much time on policy direction on those types of changes and recommendations to the department. And this is a oversight body. It sounds, it's more of an advisory body, it sounds like to me, which I think is a really good idea. And I think our whole community would benefit from that type of advisory body. But I'm having a little bit of a hard time with the disconnect between the charge of the Formation Commission and all that they looked at, and then hear the recommendations, but they didn't go to the Formation Commission to sort of give their feedback on this model as different. If you could help me with that, if you've taken input from members and this reflects that, or is this a just parallel, different track?
Sure. Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Stettin, if I understand your correction, there was a charge with, in the summer of 2020 to create a board within a year to create a framework for a recommendation for council to look at, to oversight what that looks like. And during that process, fortunately, we hired NACOL, who assists around the country in developing this. And I think both Ms. Anderson and the chief were correct. It would have been nice to help with the audit too, to kind of focus on what the issue was. But still, at least having NACOL there was an important step. And during that process and training, the commission was able to look at various models out there: review-based, auditor, monitor, investigatory, and then hybrids, which kind of come up with the same. And what the and so each of the commission spent exhaustive time studying each type of model, different models and how they function in different municipalities. And what came out of that was the report was kind of what we would call a hybrid. It has different functions of everything. So the Fire and Police Commission is definitely review-based and definitely has an ability to be auditor monitor. What it doesn't have is a disciplinary investigatory function. And part of the commission where it's missing is that one component. But there are a couple things we've tried to address that. First, as I just mentioned before, our charter provisions keeping us from going there in terms of making recommendations on discipline or being an investigator. Second, though, as Councilmember Harmon suggested, there is a need to go outside and investigate in certain situations, creating some type of written policy on that, which we can develop. So as Ms. Anderson said, we never got back to the commission because at that time when we made this staff's making this recommendation, the commission dissolved, stopped meeting. But the first thing that staff looked at was the actual recommendation and what can we, in developing the matrix, which is an attachment, what can we incorporate and what can we not. So the way I look at this body is it's a true review and a true potential audit body, but it doesn't have the true investigatory function that was in there. But again, any investigatory body would have been limited based on our charter. So.
Thank you so much for that. That's actually really helpful. And then I'm trying to think of an analogy of maybe a different department. So say Water Commission has an advisory commission and they don't have closed session ability or looking at individual personnel matters, but they're actually quite powerful in guiding policy and changes in policy and then recommendations to council and taking a deeper look within those departments of what needs to be recommended. And just help me with this. I mean, to me, I see the recommendation here as actually being quite influential and has the potential to be quite powerful in driving, structural change, if that is what's needed after an audit and looking at things over time and with input and opportunities for the public. It would be public meetings, yes. So opportunities for the public to be weighing in regularly in public comment. So my question is, and I think you can help me with this. I mean, the current function of the Fire and Police Commission is like dance permits mainly, and or maybe you can correct me on that if it's not. But this is a really big shift and expanded authority of the Fire and Police Commission, and just. Has it always been that way? Like different times when the Fire and Police Commission has had different roles, and what causes the changes of that role? Is it council direction at a given time, or how is that role expanded and contracted over time like that?
Sure. Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Stettin, the role historically has fluctuated. You know, in the early 1920s and 30s, the Fire and Police Commission was a very powerful board. They're the ones that set the salaries for the fire chief, the police chief of police. They had strong input in terms of who hired there. And then, like a lot of commissions kind of died down. And the current function of the fire and police is based on the 60s model. Now, what happened is with civil rights unrest in the 60s, et cetera, you had an uptick in commissions becoming more powerful and being more review-based, but it didn't really happen here. I guess historically that power didn't change much. And then after in the 80s, Rodney King even had a further increase of review boards actually being more investigatory and disciplinary. It didn't happen here either. But now we have a different look, and you're correct. The Fire and Police Commission right now, in terms of its traditional meetings, here's a monthly update from both the fire and police chief, and then they would look at different administrative items that they are appeal body to, like dance permits, towing issues, et cetera. They don't really deal too much with recommendations. We've had discussions of creating priority issues to comment on, but you know, it doesn't go above and beyond that. So that's why an ordinance is needed, I think, too, to help kind of kickstart this, which we would have done anyway, and elevating its standing by having meetings here, televised, maybe meeting more frequently. And they will have a greater role in terms of policy or looking on the issues in terms of even how police departments are handling investigations. And I'll give an example. State law has shifted due to the recent events in terms of transparency of really serious issues. So the passage of Senate Bill 1421 and Senate Bill 16, certain categories of misconduct of sustained findings of officers can be viewed in entirety in the Public Records Act request. And when I say entirety, I mean down to listening to getting copies of recordings of interviews. And those categories include issues of dishonesty, excessive force, sexual assault on duty, bias. So those are the issues. And the Fire and Police Commission could potentially down in the future ask, how have you handled SB 16 or SB 1421 categories? And look how those issues have been handled. And even those files, after it's completed the sustained findings, at least see, kind of look and audit how those were handled once it was done. Now, sustained finding, believe it or not, the way it's codified would be all the way up to a civil service determination and purview. But at least the Fire and Police Commission can look retroactively to how it occurred, what went down, and if they want to be really ambitious, look at the entire files and see recommendations of what they liked or not liked. So that's a really important potential that a fire and police or any commission could have, and that's key because those are the most important. I mean, all issues of misconduct are important, but SB 1421 and SB 16 really take your top 10 of what are really problematic issues. So they will have access to that down the road and potentially reviewing such matters and working with the police department and Ms. Anderson's position of how do we resolve these issues and have them not occur in the future.
I'll say for myself, that sounds far more influential to me than the just oversight for personnel. And you were mentioning too that includes budget recommendations, or could include budget recommendations and structures, and could also bring in police officers, police chief for conversations or updates and back and forth like that.
Yeah, Mayor Rouse comes from, they already have that power now, and usually the police department does a presentation of their budget before they even do council. So, and now being more involved, I could see even more specific type recommendations.
Okay, thank you. And then just to Councilmember Jordan's comments that, you know, the members right now weren't currently seated for these expanded duties, potential expanded duties. And so some options for the ordinance, would there be, I know the Formation Commission has disbanded, but have done so much homework, as you mentioned, and are so up to date and have researched other municipalities. And I'm wondering if they might extend their duties to see us through this ordinance, because it's such a extension of the work that they did in the recommendations. And then seat the new, I mean, I would recommend seating a new, purpose-selected commission members for the implementation from then on out. Do you speak to that?
Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Sneddon, there's a few options before council. One is that there's currently 2 openings on the commission. So what makes it difficult right now is that they barely have a quorum, right? So making sure that every commissioner can be present for a meeting, and as we work with them to draft the ordinance and engage the community and providing feedback on the ordinance, it could be a little challenging. But I definitely hear the note that we should wait, because we are going to be essentially asking those commissioners to take on a lot more responsibility than they had initially signed up for. And as Ms. Bjork mentioned, you also can facilitate a special recruitment process, and that can, again, happen at any time after the draft ordinance language, and we have those, again, findings and recommendations from the audit at the same time, so that will be simultaneous. The last piece is my commitment, as well as Mr. Joyma's commitment, to engage the broader public and community outside of the commission, and even former members of the CFC, to make sure that we're drafting ordinance language, instilling duties and authorities with the Fire and Police Commission that meet the expectation of the broader community when it comes to accountability and transparency.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Friedman.
Thank you. Most of my questions were answered. I just wanted to follow up on the issue of the Fire Police Commission currently, and whether or not to go forward with the different options. So the ordinance, I think earlier Mr. Doimus said that tentatively it would come back. You said summer, but maybe perhaps fall, right? So say fall, or maybe September-ish. When do we do the fall recruitment instead of doing a special recruitment, because there's a whole timing with that with our staff, and if it's just an extra month or a couple weeks, then we don't necessarily have to do a special recruitment if the ordinance isn't even going to be done till September.
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Friedman, we begin the recruitment, I believe, in November, and we don't appoint until the very end of December generally. So you would have a 3-person commission unless you appoint. If you fill 1 seat, you'll have a 4-person commission through 2023. So
Okay, so a special recruitment would, if we wait till after the ordinance, it would speed up the process by like a month or 2.
I think you could do it in parallel. We could start a special recruitment as soon as we know we're sort of in the home stretch with the ordinance, such that we know what the recommendations for the composition of the Fire and Police Commission is, and that it would then follow. I mean, it would take some planning to figure out the timing, but that the appointments would follow shortly on the heels of your adoption of the ordinance. We would need to feel our way out a little bit on that in terms of when we started that recruitment in order to make it consistent with the recommendations of the ordinance.
Okay, so it would speed up the process. It would be after the ordinance, but we could do it somewhat concurrently, and then it would speed that up rather than having the police and fire go all the way till basically the end of the year with just 3 members. And then you mentioned that we do have the ability to look at all 5, put them all 5 up, even though we've already, some of them are appointed beyond the end of this year?
I would defer to the attorney's office, but they serve at your pleasure, I believe.
Yeah, Honorable Mayor, Councilmember Friedman, you'd have to give the existing commissioners some due process, but you do have the authority to remove them. And due process means a hearing to explain why. And the rationale would be that you're recasting the commission to perform dramatically different duties, and you'd like to give them a chance to reapply.
Okay. That's helpful as we try to figure out what we're doing, because I think I could see having them stay on, but I can also see this as a drastic change, and there's going to be a lot more interest in this commission probably than there has been in the last many years. and I would expect we're going to get more applicants. So maybe that's something that we would consider or not. I don't know at this point. And then last question on this is the question of expanding it from 5 to 7. It's a charter amendment. When would that go on the ballot if we were going to do that?
2024 would be your next general,
November of 24.
correct.
And then my last question, I think that, yeah, that was all my questions. All the other ones were answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gutierrez, you have a follow-up question?
Yes. Just for the public information, can somebody give me just a brief overview of the 10 recommendations that, the 12 recommendations that the CFC group gave to council? Just so the public can understand, every time we talk about those recommendations, what they are. And then, because we really went into detail about the 2 that we can't, which is because of personnel confidentiality. But if one of the city staff can just read through real quick the 10 recommendations that they gave.
Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Gutierrez, the following recommendations for duties and authorities of the Civilian Oversight Board are outlined in the CFC final report. Make policy recommendations. And again, these are the high-level headings. Involvement in the hiring and evaluation of the independent police monitor. Request data related to Santa Barbara Police Department pattern and practice. Review complaint process. Be able to meet in closed session and reviewing personnel matters. Issue subpoenas. Conduct community outreach. Foster a collaborative relationship with the Santa Barbara Police Department and other city departments. Involvement in the hiring of the police chief. Contract services to fulfill the duties that are assigned to them. Budget proposal approval, and again, a special engagement with officer-involved shootings and creating that community venue to have that open discussion.
Thank you.
All right, very good. Mr. Gutierrez.
Sorry, Mayor, for catching you off guard there. I have a question. So the notion of combining the oversight committee and the Fire and Police Commission is an interesting idea, but as the liaison to that group, there's been some outcry from community members about the transparency of that commission. And I was wondering, as of now, are those meetings being recorded and available to the public in any way?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Gutierrez. No, the only time they were being recorded and people could watch it was actually during COVID when we were having everything online. Right now, as you know, our meetings are in Station House 1. So as in the staff report, that is why we recommended, since they're going to be engaging in new duties, to be held here, televised, and potentially increasing the frequency. For example, the meetings are every last Thursday of the month, and then November and December, they don't usually have meetings because those last Thursdays fall on like holiday weeks. So you're talking about meeting 10 times a year, unless they have a special meeting. They have one this week on a tow permit, taxi cab permit, actually. So that's part of the work that we have to do is, increasing the frequency, having an ordinance that, really presents the outline for the work they do, like we have on so many of our other commissions and boards, and increasing its visibility.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, very good. We'll go to public speech. Begin with Gabe Escobedo, followed by Louisa Wood. You have 3 minutes at the podium, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and City Council. My name is Gabe Escobedo. I was the chair of the Community Formation Commission that developed a thoughtful, well-researched, and effective recommendation for civilian oversight. I'm here to state that I and many others are opposed to the recommendations put forth by the city administrator. While the staff report would like you to think that this recommendation is in line with the CFC recommendation, it is not. This is a recommendation from the Chief of Police. You tasked our body with forming a recommendation for the needs of the city of Santa Barbara, and we fulfilled that duty. This was a recommendation for the whole community, and that included those that are the most vulnerable and under-resourced. The fact is that what you have before you is an advisory board and not an oversight board. In other terms, oversight in name only. Most of this staff report comes directly from previous statements and matrices developed by the Chief of Police. Most notably, the matrix that is attached to your staff report comes directly from the Chief of Police's response to our draft recommendation. The way I know this is that there are many errors in the recommendation sections and in today's presentation that are based on previous versions of our recommendation, such as the duty to hire and fire the director. We have not included that portion for multiple versions of our recommendation. This should not be taken as a critique of the Chief of Police, but a statement of fact. From the beginning, I have had community members and members of the CFC come to me with concerns about the City of Santa Barbara ignoring our recommendations. And I assured them that the city would take our recommendations seriously. I was wrong. We developed a recommendation as a whole, and you only have part of our recommendation. That is well within your right as a city council, but the fact remains that this was predetermined by the city administrator's office. From hiring a position that would support civilian oversight before our recommendation was finalized with no input from the CFC, to shutting the CFC out of this process following our presentation on April 22nd. Necessary change always has to justify itself in ways that the status quo never has to. Well, I'm here to say that the burden of proof is no longer on us. It is on you seven, and quite frankly, more than anyone, the city administrator. The CFC set a national standard for how to develop a recommendation for civilian oversight. But this recommendation falls far short from the work that we did. If this fails, I do not want to hear about the public process that you tasked us with to develop civilian oversight. That will not be at the feet of the CFC, it'll be at the feet of you all and the city administrator. If this is the route you're going to go down, then the community deserves to know why and specifically. And if you point to the budget, I would remind you that we presented you with a modest budget alternative. The response was not to try to figure out if the city could afford it. It was just to flat out say no and choose the cheapest and easiest option. This is not about the perfect being the enemy of the good. This is about effective versus ineffective. At the minimum today, you should make the following edits to your proposal. Halt the Fire and Police Commission, do a special recruitment. Allocate funds for a police oversight practitioner to be a resource through implementation process, and provide the evaluation for workload for the independent police monitor position. Include the CFC in the ordinance writing process, and the entire Fire and Police Commission should decide the threshold for serious allegations worthy of outside investigation during a public meeting. And the audit should include all trainings and an analysis of the budget. Thank you, and I'll be here for any questions.
Okay, Louisa Wood, please, followed by Serafina Chavez.
Good afternoon, City Councilmen all. As you may know, I'm Louisa Wood, and I had the privilege of serving on the Community Formation Commission, and I currently serve as the police liaison for the Fire and Police Commission. I come here today to say a few things. First, I'm here to share that I cannot support the City Administrator and Chief Malekian's proposal for civilian oversight as presented today. I cannot support the recommendation to utilize the existing Fire and Police Commission as the home for the future Civilian Oversight Board. We on the Community Formation Commission tirelessly developed recommendations over a 13-month period that were based wholly on the needs of the City of Santa Barbara and the Santa Barbara Police Department, and not, in fact, the national narrative, despite what many in Santa Barbara have stated. Secondly, I cannot support the City Administrator and Chief Malekian's proposal to task the recommended IPM, Independent Police Monitor, duties as identified in the Community Formation Commission recommendations to the newly hired Assistant to the City Administrator. While I'm very happy that Ms. Barbara Anderson has joined the City Administrator office and believe that Ms. Anderson has tremendous background in advocating for individuals experiencing homelessness and working in emergency response, the independent police monitor position requires a significant expertise in the field of auditing and monitoring police department agencies. This independent police monitor position, in fact, requires years of experience working in cities across the United States, examining data and trends, working on investigations, and working on community engagement. Moreover, the independent police monitor position will take much more time that is allotted for Ms. Anderson currently, given the sheer number of duties she is required to take on currently. Therefore, I request that the City Council consider contracting out for an individual with the time and expertise to take on the independent police monitor role, especially at the beginning of this important process. These funds for this contractor should be allocated for a police oversight practitioner to guide implementation and evaluation of its effectiveness. I can't move this thing down. Finally, the City Council does, you do ultimately decide to move forward with the City and Chief's proposal to house the Civilian Oversight Board within the Fire and Police Commission, I ask City Council members, along with Councilman Jordan's earlier questions, to greatly consider holding off on appointing the 2 new members currently so that we can include all community members and have them opportunity to take part in this incredibly important commission. I also request that City Council consider including all three members of the current commission, Fire and Police Commission, to decide the threshold for serious allegations worthy of outside investigation, not just the current and future chair of the commission as proposed by the city administrator and Chief Malekian. Only one person on the commission to decide something so important. It should be all of the members of the City Council, of the Fire and Police Commission, excuse me. City Councilman, I ask that you truly consider this matter before you. We ask that we were tasked to create effective civilian oversight, and I feel that the civilian oversight system that is proposed by City, the Administrator and Chief Malekian would not be effective. We need transparency and trust to build within our beautiful city. Thank you.
Thank you. Serafina Chavez?
Good afternoon. My name is Serafina Chavez, and I'm a former member of the Community Formation Commission. I also do not support this recommendation, as is due to the lack of collaboration and transparency from the City Administrator's office. Our commission as a whole was not contacted nor given any updates until the recommendation was released. I was never emailed, contacted in any other way by anyone in the City Administrator's office, and I haven't heard anything since we presented at the City Council meeting up until a few days ago when this was all released. There has been just an overall lack of justification as to why certain aspects of our recommendation were and were not included, and who was consulted in these serious implementations. Our commission trained, researched, and consulted with experts in oversight and our community to write our recommendations for well over a year. It feels as if our recommendations were ignored without much justification, and I don't feel that the same care and open communication was taken with these recommendations that are presented here before you. With that said, I do have 3 main recommendations. Number 1, in the matrix that was given to you, I believe that every member of the Fire and Police Commission should be consulted on the matter regarding what serious allegations should be investigated during a public meeting. It should not just be the Chief of Police, the City Administrator, and the current or future chair of the Fire and Police Commission. Limiting it to just the chair voting on such a serious matter of the Fire and Police Commission seems unrepresentative and is not really what's done on other commissions. Secondly, there should be a delay in the recruitment of the current 2 vacancies on the Fire and Police Commission, since their duties would be changing so drastically. There also needs to be more time to advertise these positions to the public. Lastly, the drafting ordinance language should be an open process as much as possible and should be in collaboration with community and the Community Formation Commission, as we already have lots of training under our belt. So I do support what Councilmember Sneddon said with recommending the Community Formation's duties to possibly extend. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, do we have speakers online?
Yes, we do. We have a number of people who have raised their hand. If you are logged on and wish to speak on this item, please raise your hand. I'll call out the first couple of speakers.
Okay, and I'll make an announcement right now. If anybody else wants to raise their hand, need to do so in the next 5 minutes if you're online. So
Very
go
good.
ahead and call out the first speaker, please.
Our first 5 speakers, and if you're not called now, we'll call you a little later, don't worry. E. Howard Green, Christian Alonso, Kim Johnson, Rachel Johnson, and Stanley Zankoff. E. Howard Green, please go ahead. E. Howard Green, you can unmute yourself and go ahead.
It says I am muted, but I can't unmute.
Okay, we can hear you, Mr. Green.
Thank you very much. I have several comments. I certainly agree with the notion of adding a couple more people if the police and Fire and Police Commission format is used. I also very much appreciated Ms. Gutierrez asking about the what the top 10 were. I can't tell from the 25 recommendations that are attached to today's agenda or the 15 recommendations regarding the auditor monitor, which ones were accepted. They are not numbered even consecutively, or it's very hard to find the specific second column names. The third thing I'd like to raise is that Ms. Sneddon mentioned a briefing to council members. Well, I'm sure this was done with appropriate Brown Act considerations, but if it was so complex that you needed to have a special briefing for individual council members, where does the public get that information to be able to make intelligent comments? There was a discussion about new member training, which is part of the Fire and Police Commission. That should be open to any interested party. It's a government training of citizens, and there's no reason you have to be appointed to take that training. Now, maybe the police department should have a veto if somebody's a convicted criminal or something. My next point is that the Ordinance Committee, the Finance Committee, and there's a couple of other subcommittees of your council meet simultaneously. How can we observe both sets of meetings when they occur? Sounds like Ordinance Committee will have a big job, and it ought to be open to the public. The last thing I think I would like to point out is that we have a new format that perhaps comes with the new website of what I call skinny announcements about meetings. That's how I found out about the meeting today. Typically, one of those skinny announcements for a regular meeting is skinny, and the link it has is not to the normal agenda, but it's to one that is the entire packet, no ability to link to specific pages apparent. So, council members, I appreciate the fact that the staff has done this work, but you need to be very forthright on this.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Next speaker, please.
Our next speaker is Kim Johnson. We also have a few people who have called in. If you are calling in using a phone, to raise your hand, press *9. This is on the front page of the agenda. But if you're on the phone and you want to speak, press *9. Okay, next speaker is Kim Johnson. Kim Johnson, please go ahead. You can unmute yourself. There you go.
Excellent. Good afternoon. My name is Kim Johnson, and I had the pleasure of serving on the Community Formation Commission for over a year. I was fortunate enough to be approved and served alongside very smart, dedicated, and thoughtful individuals during that time. I speak both of the individuals on the commission and those city staff who walked along with us during the process. With that said, I agree with the statement that there is a misalignment of the charge for the commission versus the recommendations we heard today, which is why I cannot support the recommendations. As I understood, the charge for the commission in layman's terms was to create a recommendation for external oversight of the Santa Barbara Police Department that would serve the public, increase trust, and add a layer of transparency and accountability that benefits all parties. This is what taxpayers expect of us, and we worked diligently to be good stewards of that responsibility. Given that, while I understand that assigning the role of oversight to the Fire and Police Commission was settled upon out of expediency, among other things, let's be very clear about the implied and real implications of doing this. The desire for oversight to be seen as independent will be lost. The enforcement authority of the oversight body will be non-existent. And for a commission that already struggles to recruit members, I question their ability and desire to fill these new duties. I agree with those that have spoken that there is a need for a public process in all that is done in relation to the oversight body, and appreciate those on City Council advocating for transparency and inclusion of all stakeholders in the process. Thank you all for your time and consideration. I applaud you in advance for your adherence to the voices of the community, particularly those not represented in the room today.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Christian Alonso. Christian Alonso, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Christian Alonso, and I was a member of the Community Formation Commission as well. I want to echo the sentiments of our Commission Chair Gabe Escobedo and my fellow Commission members in my strong opposition to the proposal you have before you today. I was pretty dismayed to learn of this alternative proposal, and as the chair mentioned, that is because it is full of errors and misrepresentations of what we actually recommended. And it's really not even in the same universe as what we spent a full 13 months researching and working collaboratively with the community on to produce for you. Additionally, the CFC was not consulted on this set of new recommendations or given a chance to weigh in or provide feedback. So as has been said, what you have before you today is not really oversight. It is an advisory board that is not going to meet the needs that our community came together to demand in the first place. I'm worried that this decision to produce this alternative proposal was solely based on the cost of the proposal. And I would just really ask the council to take a second and review this alternative proposal closely and really give it some more thought before moving forward with the decision, because if the exclusive reason to take up this new proposal was based on cost, our recommendation included several different options and possibilities, and we always viewed this proposal, our recommendations, as an investment in oversight for the community and in best practices for our police department, right? You see across the United States and in municipalities of similar size and scope of Santa Barbara that have exploding costs due to misconduct settlements or settlements related to police misconduct. And the proposal that we put together just pales in comparison to the cost of a potential settlement. And so I would just ask the council to think about that and weigh what we put before you a couple months ago with what you have before you right now. But thank you so much for taking the time to consider, and for staff to putting and all of your help in getting the initial recommendations off to you. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Stanley Zankov, then Matt Lowe, then Chelsea Lancaster, Jordan Killebrew, Simone A., the phone number ending in 2169. Rachel Johnson, please go ahead. One moment. Rachel Johnson, now go ahead.
Excellent. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. All right. My name is Rachel Johnson. I'm also one of the former members of the Community Formation Commission. I want to first of all uplift all my fellow CFC commissioners who have spoken today. Hearing my name called after Kim Johnson in roll call made me feel like we were right back there. It really was an honor to work with them, and it's also an honor to be here talking to you again with them today. So in addition to adding my voice to the position that a lot of them have very clearly stated about the recommendations presented to you, I just wanted to add a few more thoughts. First of all, I want to thank the council members for your thoughtful questions and uplift and support some of your comments and suggestions specifically. I want to appreciate the focus of both Ms. Anderson's presentation initially and on many of your questions from the dais on the complaint process and ensuring that there's community participation around making that more accessible. This was definitely something that came up for us in our work so much, and I want to encourage you to continue centering that community engagement on some of these specific issues. Also want to appreciate and support the questions about how to intentionally reconfigure the Fire and Police Commission, if that is the direction that we end up going. Please don't forget how intentionally and inclusively you appointed the members of the CFC and how that diversity of representation from so many different parts and communities that make up the city of Santa Barbara led to such incredible conversation and really rich research around what our recommendations were in terms of how they would work best for our community in particular. So thank you for acknowledging the challenge of what it'll be to create a new culture for that current commission, if that's the direction that the city ends up going. And since trust and transparency was always at the heart of our work and our purview, I want to just name and further clarify a few things that have come up. The CFC was not consulted about developing the parameters of the audit or the recommendation, the staff report in and of itself. There were informal conversations that did happen with a few former members of the CFC and city staff, but I don't want the public nor the rest of the commissioners who might be surprised to hear about their supposed participation, when they hear this, to think it was really, a joint or collaborative endeavor in terms of the writing. And as Serafina Chavez already mentioned, referencing her own experience, I don't want any of my other former CFC colleagues to think that official work continued without their participation or without their knowing about it. So those of us who were part of those conversations, I think it's already been made clear, we do believe, things have been changed. The scope of the audit is not enough. So I won't spend too much time repeating that, but as Ms. Anderson described, a lot of that, came directly from the priorities of the Santa Barbara Police Department and elements of city staff, not from the CFC.
You need to wrap up, please.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'll skip the last little bit. We've talked about it a lot. So thank you all. Please just continue that commitment to the engagement of the community and the public process.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Very good. One moment. Next speaker is Stanley Zankoff. Stanley Zankoff, please go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, Mayor and Council and members of the public. I'm calling in to support and uplift the comments given by former CFC members Gabe, Christian, Kim, Rachel, who just spoke before me and clarified some key nuances in all this, and others who are elevating the concerns that the staff recommendation before you today is significantly out of step with the recommendations of the Community Formation Commission. I'm not an expert in this work, but as an engaged community member who cares deeply that we get this right, I am concerned about why there are so many seemingly serious discrepancies in the report before you and the CFC's work. As I've shared before, it seems to me that we've been incredibly fortunate as a city to have had the membership of the committee, the commission and the work be so thoughtful and diligent. And it seems that they've put forth really nationally renowned best practices in bettering our city's police accountability and oversight. So it seems to me that we should be seriously considering them and not gravitating away from them so much. And if that we do, that there's a clear reasoning as to why you are not following their insight. I appreciate Councilmember Snedden's suggestion, if it's favorable to the CFC's members, that their term be extended and that there might be that might be a good actionable next step to help resolve this. And a good next step that's in the spirit of community trust and transparency, which is so fundamental to making this a success. So thank you to the council, to city staff, especially Barbara Anderson's really thorough report, to the community members, and of course to the continuing civic service of the Community Formation Commission members who are continuing to give your time and serious consideration on all of this. So let's get this right. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Matt Lowe. Matt Lowe, please go ahead.
Lower hand. Zoom. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Hi, Mayor and City Council. My name is Matt Lowe. I am a former advisor of Chief Lori Luna. I was on her advisory committee. After Chief Lori Luna resigned, I wrote an article for our local newspapers of my experience on Chief Luna's council, and they were unwilling to publish it because it was they said it was quote too much and not appropriate for where we're at right now. And so I say that this and the idea of transparency in our city council and an administrator is currently continuing to persist in this idea of non-transparency. And I think there's a big issue here that we're really not knowing what's going on. And we need to recognize that this original work of the CFC came out of the George Floyd uprising that took place just over 2 years ago. In fact, 2 years ago, a week and 4 days ago, recognizing that time. And the work of healing justice in this community and not giving this CFC commission its full power and putting it under the Fire and Police Commission is dismayable. It's not right. It's a slap in the face for the 13 months of this work that has been done. Because it's quicker, because it saves more money. That's not right. We're asking for community to be supported, and for transparency and for power to really be shifted here. We're not saying the status quo is something that we cannot do anymore, and so we need transparency. And this goes for our administrator, our city council, our newspapers, independent news press. Yes, yeah, we need to know what's going on. And the behind the doors things that can't go on any longer because that doesn't bring community together. So I ask you not to put it under the police commission, not to move forward with this recommendation, and to further transparency. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Chelsea Lancaster. Chelsea Lancaster, please go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. I want to support and amplify a lot of the comments that have already been made by former CFC members and community members who supported and amplified the need for this level of transparency in our local policing department. I didn't have time to prepare any comments because I just received the notification about this meeting 2 hours before it was set to start. I've talked to some of the CFC members, especially those that were more representative of the communities that are disproportionately impacted by policing in Santa Barbara, and none of them were contacted. None of them were spoken to. So I would like to know, because we haven't heard from a whole lot of CFC members that were actually consulted, who was actually consulted in this process. Y'all complain about a lack of engagement, especially from more marginalized members of the community and activists, especially the women in Healing Justice and other activists. We gave that to you during this process. This was the most engaging process for a commission. It was the most diverse commission. It was representative in almost every single way. And that was not the work of the city. That was the work of people in the community that are working in the margins. And this is just a huge slap in the face to that process. This is the antithesis of the democratic process that we all fought for. And I want to name that the 3 people, again, I haven't been able to look through all the materials because this came so suddenly, but the 3 people that are tasked with making these decisions at this point are 3 white folks, 3 people that again represent the folks that are not most disproportionately impacted by policing. So I just want to say that this is really frustrating, frankly, and this is not the solution. One of the ways in which we uphold white supremacy culture is a sense of urgency. And that's exactly what y'all are doing. This is not what the community asked for. And again, the lack of transparency and frankly, straight the outright like lies that have happened in this meeting alone are really frustrating. So thank you for hearing me out.
Okay, next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Jordan Killebrew, then Simone A., and then our final speaker will be the phone number ending in 2169. For that phone caller, when we get to you to mute, you're going to press *6, *6 to unmute yourself. Okay, Jordan Killebrew, please go ahead.
Hello. Hello, and thank you, council, administrators, and staff. My name is Jordan Killebrew, and I have the distinct honor to work alongside some of you among our amazing Community Formation Commission that was selected by City Council out of 96 individuals. And we worked diligently and hard to provide recommendations that would align with our community and uphold those that were most impacted. I echo our commission members and the thoughts that are already presented by them. No need to repeat what's already been so eloquently stated. But if we are moving forward with the Fire and Police Commission reconfigured in a way, I strongly urge that council consider an intentional selection of a diverse and representative group as it aligns to the new purview. This means, to me, selecting a new commission, in my opinion. Again, I have to echo my commission members who worked so hard. Again, I thank you for your time, and please continue to engage the community in the public process, not in silence and not in silos. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Simone A. Simone A., please go ahead.
Greetings, council members. This is Simone of Healing Justice Santa Barbara. I come to you all today honestly exhausted because you all continue to remind the community that the people who you actually listen to are white police officers. And that was illustrated so clearly during the last meeting when almost everyone who spoke against real oversight was white and aligned or formally employed by the police department. You all are talking about audits, but the Independent has already written multiple articles talking about how the use of force has been used in disparate ways against Black and brown residents. And apparently you refuse to believe us. Only offering half of what the CFC have asked is not doing what community has asked you to do. And you have asked us to tell you what to do multiple times. Unfortunately for you all, you keep telling on yourselves. Ms. Anderson at first said that this was going to be more oversight than had ever been seen before. But then Mr. Doimus got up and said, actually, it wouldn't change much that we already do because the external investigations would have to be triggered by some standard that isn't actually set. And we know when there is no standard, the standard is to uphold white supremacy. So I object to what you're doing here today. If you must go with the police commission, you must reseat that entire board. There is a reason that the CFC was the most diverse board that this city has ever had, and that was intentional. As Chelsea said, we as Healing Justice put forward that the people most impacted, not those with the most educational or police experience, should be uplifted. And so if we think about who is on the police commission now, it would not be able to meet any of the goals that you have set out. Policy is nothing without practice. Right now, the police department has been refusing to release documents through the Public Records Act, and I truly believe they will continue to do the same thing, even if you have an advisory board that cannot actually offer disciplinary measures. So I would push you to do exactly what the CFC asked you to do, what community asked you to do for over 2 years. You need to listen to the Black and brown residents of your community, not exclusively those who are white and aligned with police.
Next speaker, please.
Our final speaker is the phone number ending in 2169. And you can unmute yourself by pressing *6. There you go. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, council, men and women, and Mayor Randy Rouse. First and foremost, my name is Angelina Dedamani, and I am a community member. And I want to thank, first and foremost, CSC for all of their due diligence, hard work, time, and effort that they put forth for 13 months in order to provide an option for moving forward for a truly independent committee. I think that it's long overdue for an independent committee, an oversight committee that can participate in policy, that can make recommendations. And quite frankly, we have so many talented and smart people of all walks of life, all races, all religions, all nationalities within our community, that as a community that's being affected, I would think that we would utilize people within the community on that commission to build bridges and gaps in between law enforcement and the community, so we can cut the red tape, so we can go ahead and set forth open doors, and when there's a problem, remedy it. We don't need to have closed session meetings. We don't need to have Brown Act violations or coffee shop and cocktail meetings in order to get things done. As long as there's transparency, I think that this independent oversight committee could ensure that open door policy for the community and bridge between law enforcement and the city and everybody. Going forth with the police and fire commission or committee, I think, is a disaster. The fire and police committee have so much on their plate already. This is going to be an additional task that's overburdensome, and you have well-qualified individuals with CFC that can go ahead and get this accomplished. I think that another additional issue that I'd like to point out is staff already for the city administration has so much on their plate. So now adding another task, more ordinances, more, there's just more meetings for meetings. And I think there's going to be a lot of wasted time. And I think this is a long overdue independent oversight committee that should be in place. And I think that council should pump the brakes and really look at everything and take all the public comment into account before making any decisions, just to rubber stamp and put the police and fire committee as the oversight for this. Again, thank you everyone for all your due diligence, time, and effort, and I greatly appreciate the opportunity to be heard. Have a great day.
All right, thank you very much. And that's it for public comment. We'll go back to the council for comment. I'd like to have my colleagues bear in mind that we've had a hearing and we've gone through a lot of these points already. So keep that in mind as you make your comments as we wrap up. And I will take who would ever like to speak. Looks like Ms. Snedden is out of the gate. Here we go.
I'm reluctant to go first because I'm very interested to hear from colleagues. The first thing I do want to say, before getting to the substance of it, that being briefed by staff is very standard. We get briefed by all kinds of departments on all kinds of issues. We're looking at a lot of complicated things each week, and it's very standard to be briefed. It's not it's one council member at a time or two. There's no Brown Act violation there. It's one direction flow of information so that we can save time asking questions, and then we re-ask a lot of our questions publicly so that the public is informed as well. You'll hear us say a lot of times, like for the public to know, I'm going to ask you, and then we ask again, and it's something we maybe already even know the answer to because we already asked. But I just want to be really clear on that. I can see the perception that a lot is happening privately, but we saw the report the same day you saw the report. I saw it Thursday was the first time I saw it. Monday had an opportunity to ask staff questions. And I apologize if how I thanked staff for the briefing maybe gave a different impression, but I want to be really, really clear on that. That's something we take advantage of all the time, that we can ask questions ahead of time. So I'm going to put that to just make that point there. So, I'm just going to reiterate comments I made at the April 22nd meeting, but I think with a different emphasis now. The recommendations that came out of CFC were proactive, not reactive. They were carefully considered. We had broad community engagement. We took our time over several meetings to interview interested people who are candidates to serve on the commission. It generated so much community support. It was a breath of fresh air to have the feeling that we were maybe doing something right, that we were listening and responding to the community, and we were overwhelmed. We said it at the time, overwhelmed by the quality of candidates and the embarrassment of riches of the candidates and the qualifications and perspectives. And it was very difficult to make that decision because of so much engagement and people, yourselves, who had already been so involved in the community that this wasn't sort of a brand new training for you. This was you bringing all of that community engagement and work in the community for decades, and us benefiting from your time and your treasure and your talent, and paying for childcare so that you could come, hundreds of dollars of childcare, so you could come and take each one of these recommendations seriously. One of the last meetings that we met in person and I attended, and I was so in awe, really, of how carefully each one of those recommendations for the hiring process or who the qualifications for who might serve on this committee. It was so clear you felt a responsibility to see these recommendations through. It's not for nothing that you spent 13 months, and I really want to emphasize that it's a lot of years before that 13 months working on these issues before you got to that 13 months and had a platform to be able to publicly, openly, with open hearts, really, working with police, working with Nicole, having all of this community engagement to get to this point and to have there be any, I'm seeing your entire body language change from when you presented your recommendations to just back how it was. And I don't want to go backwards. I just don't want to go backwards. I feel like this isn't ready. That's all. I feel like this is one, when I read it and I heard the recommendations, I thought, well, actually, this seems like more powers, more influence, more impact on policy changes in a way that could truly be a partnership and influential with the police department and community and public engagement in ways that maybe hadn't been considered. But that's the issue, is you haven't had a chance to weigh in on them. And we don't have the benefit of your considered care and perspective on what do you think of these recommendations. I'm tempted right now, and I have a list of questions, I was tempted to call up Chair Escobedo and ask him point-by-point questions about, well, what about this and what about this? But that's not the point of having a carefully considered, large community engagement process with multiple voices at the table. It's not to winnow it down to one person having the authority to weigh in on this. I don't feel comfortable moving forward with these recommendations until they've had a chance to come before the commission. If you'd asked me yesterday how I felt about it, I would have said, actually, I think these look pretty good. I think it's actually more input and influence than was otherwise recommended. And I had a different perspective on it, and this is the power of public comment. And the power of this commission is when a majority of this commission comes to public comment, not just saying, no, we can't really support this, but having a reaction to how far divergent these recommendations are from your recommendations. So I'm not sitting here today thinking that one or the other is the way to go. I think they both actually sound workable and have benefits, but I don't feel comfortable going this route until it's gone to the CFC for comment and input. And I don't know what our rules are for reconvening, but I remember at some of your last meetings, many of you said, I'm available to serve again, I'm available to serve again, call me back if it comes time to hire someone or to give input. And I think it would not be a difficult ask to give further input on this model as presented. And thankfully, you each made a couple of bullet points of, if you are going to go forward with this, these are what we're asking. But without the input and the time to make a recommendation, this is neither here nor there. And so, I mean, it would be staff time, and it is restructuring, and it is creating a very powerful, expanded duties of a commission that exists, is that advisable? I mean, it sounded good to me at the time, but with input and public engagement, now it sounds like maybe that needs a little bit of refinement. So I think it just should go back with these recommendations to consider and input. I think there was confusion on the charge of the commission, which I think you thoroughly executed your duties, and I mean thoroughly and with integrity, and so much responsibility on each decision made, so much going into that. And then for these recommendations to come out as sort of a parallel track or a different track, I think we're close, but I don't want to come this far and have it now be a source of division again when we've done so much to be building together. So I think it should continue to be a building process, and there's no hurry until we get there. This isn't has to be done tomorrow. I mean, I think if we're talking about budgetary concerns and constraints, and if we're talking about a policy advisory body, and if the CFC is given back that charge of structural changes and what is your recommendations based on what's here before us, I think that could continue to work towards a collaborative, community-based outcome. And if it's not that, if it's not like a feel good for everyone, what's the point, is my feeling about it right now. I've no interest in pushing something forward just to have it done if it doesn't have the full support of the community.
Ms. Harmon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I also am going to start first just with expressing my sincere appreciation for the work of the Community Formation Commission. You all have truly dedicated yourselves to this effort. We all saw it month after month after month. We tasked you over a year ago with wading into a really complicated area of public policy, one that implicates some very serious and sensitive topics, and the professionalism and dedication with which you invested yourself in that topic is absolutely commendable. And we're all better. We're better prepared, we're better informed, we're simply better because of the work that you have done. Like Councilmember Snedden, I would hope to see that work continue. So thank you. Thank you as well to our police liaisons, Lieutenant Hill, Chief Malekian. I know you engaged in this process, spent a lot of your time, to our experts from the City Attorney's Office. You dug in as well. This was a really significant undertaking. And from the outside, it appeared to me that you all really met the moment. And I know in a topic like this, that is not easy to do. So thank you for that. I do, though we're talking about the specifics of this recommendation today, I have to take this opportunity again to just say a few words about why I'm so passionate about civilian oversight in general and why I think it's so necessary in our community. It's a critical component for us in the effort toward establishing more equitable policing practices in our city. An oversight system, one that is not oversight just in name only, but one that's real, that's truly transparent. It gives community members a platform to understand and participate in their police department, to understand the processes and actions of our police department. It's all of ours, and we should value it in that way as well. Oversight serves a dual purpose. It gives the public a voice in the process, and it gives an opportunity for law enforcement to be directly accountable to and, importantly, engaged with the community members that they serve. So I've said all this before, and I will say it again and again and again until it's not necessary anymore. Civilian oversight is not about punishment of our police officers. It is not a referendum on or a critique of the good work that our officers do in the city of Santa Barbara. And I do want to say that I actually personally really regret that this topic has become so political and so partisan. Civilian oversight of police, to me, is not a political issue. Civilian oversight is about increasing transparency and growing in trust. Transparency and trust, not politics. Transparency and trust are two things that we all believe in, all of us, two things that our entire community can get behind, two things that I know our entire community is behind. So as Councilmember Snedden said, let's make sure we continue in that direction. So whether or not we move forward with this framework today, I do want to express my disappointment in hearing from so many of our CFC members that they don't feel heard and were not consulted on this recommendation, this final recommendation. I hear your frustration, and I receive that. That said, I do think that we are closer, maybe, than we think. There's potential here to get to a place where everyone feels heard and the recommendations are truly community-based. I think we can get somewhere useful here, and somewhere where we have a program that is allowing oversight to do exactly what we want it to do, increase transparency and trust. I do support gathering additional feedback from the CFC on these recommendations. It has been a long process. To the extent that that group is willing to provide their feedback, I mean, I think they told us today 3 or 4 things that they would like to do to these recommendations to be able to support them. I actually had a list very similar to what was said, that I was going to come in here and say, these are the 3 things I would like to see to be able to vote for this. So I think actually, though it sounds like we may be halting the process, another meeting might get us to a point where everyone's coming in here celebrating. I think we're actually much, much closer than any of us realize that we are. A couple of things that are personally important to me that I've heard from a number of different people, and that I would be interested in the feedback from all parties, city staff, our police department, CFC members, if they're willing to be reconstituted. I mean, I think there's an issue here that the committee has been disbanded, so maybe individually we can get feedback from each commissioner. I leave that to the professionals to think about. But here's a couple of things that would make me comfortable today if we were to move forward. First, I feel strongly that we should reconstitute the Fire and Police Commission. I don't have a strong opinion whether we use Fire and Police Commission or create another board. To me, what matters is the substance, not the name. So if we are expanding the duties of the Fire and Police Commission and really giving them the power to do this oversight work, I'm happy with that. I think that's fine. But I would like to see a totally new recruitment of all members. And I mean no disrespect to the current members, and I would assume and in fact encourage them to apply for this special recruitment. But if we are to expand the scope, as is recommended by city staff so substantively, I think it's absolutely necessary that we reconstitute the board so that everyone on it has an understanding of the responsibilities moving forward. So I would like to see that. I also think, given that, we should delay the recruitment of the 2 members. I guess we could appoint them in an interim fashion if necessary, but to me that seems very much overcomplicated, and let's just press pause and we can reconstitute the board at the time that the ordinance has been finalized. On the audit, I very much support the chief's suggestion to do an audit. I think that that will be very helpful for information for all of us to have moving forward. In addition to that, though, what I would really very much like to see is for us to work with an independent consultant in support of Ms. Anderson's work for year 1, at least, to set up this process. People will say, where's the money? I have an idea. We had $200,000 allocated of ARPA funds for a rent control study. We didn't use that money. Presumably, at least half of it will have to go toward the housing crisis ad hoc. But perhaps there is $50,000 in that funding that we can use to contract with an independent monitor to support the work of Ms. Anderson, so that that person who has expertise in this area can help her to stand up the process. I think that is very close or somewhat similar to what was requested by the CFC, perhaps smaller in scope. I know they asked for 2 or 3 years of a contract as one of the options. I think that we can find some compromise there. Money is an issue. This would help us at least get to year one and have we can all have some assurance that that independence that was so central to the recommendations of the CFC will be part of the process. And Ms. Anderson, I know, has all the capability in the world to do this job and to do it extremely well. She does have a huge lift, and we can all use support, particularly in these areas that are very complicated and sensitive in nature. And then finally, the third addition that I would propose to these recommendations today is to require that we go to this Fire and Police Commission when it is reconstituted to develop a formalized framework for the threshold for going to external investigations. I think that, of course, there are specifics that are context dependent that will obviously come into play when we apply that framework, but it is critically important, in my view, that we have a public conversation about developing that framework, not just with the chair of the commission, but with the entire commission as a body. As Councilmember Snedden said, we've come this far. Let's not go backwards. And this is one area that really stood out to me as very, very important, and also will ensure that we get that oversight right. You know, the advisory part is so important, but so is this. And because we haven't sent out very many in the last couple of years, I don't think is a reason to just avoid putting together a framework altogether. I think that framework, if we have a public conversation about it, is what's going to give community members the assurance that there are standards and that it's not an ad hoc decision-making process when it comes to what to send out for an independent investigation and what to keep in-house. So that was a very long-winded way of saying, Mr. Mayor, that I would like to hear feedback from the CFC. I also think we're really close, and those three things that I outlined are very important to me, and I'd be interested to know if there's support from my colleagues to put those into the recommendations. And with those, I think actually we would pretty much all be on a much, much closer page, certainly in the same book. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Friedman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I guess the two words that sum up where I'm at is disappointed and frustrated. We had this long process. We had an excellent group of individuals who came together as a team, who were also supported by our excellent chief and Lieutenant Hill, who are not just known here, but they're known throughout the country, and the chief going back decades. And they are committed to the types of police departments and the types of policing that we want to see as a community. So I thank all the members of the commission for taking time, a lot of time out of your lives, because it's important to you, because it's important to the community, and making your voices heard. And I want to thank the chief and Lieutenant Hill and our staff for staffing it. And I'm disappointed because it came to this today, and to have basically the entire commission come up here and saying you can't support it. I'm going to disagree with both of my colleagues. If we went back a month ago when we had the meeting, I thought we were almost there. That's why the comments that a lot of us made, that we could bridge that gap, we're farther away than we were. I'm just maybe on a different level than all of you right now. From what I heard, it's completely different. And I'm not prepared to spend any more money on something that we're not even going to have our chief here because he has to retire by the end of this month, and he was so integral in it. We have a new chief coming in, and I think at this point, I would not feel comfortable when the entire committee came forward and said, don't support this. There's no way I could support that because it would show that I'm not listening to what you're telling me. And to start reconstituting the Fire and Police Commission when we don't even know what the product is, and to have them look at this when they've just told us what they think of it right here in public comment. And it wasn't just the 3 members that are in the room. There was those on the phone plus members of the public. I really don't know where to go from here, but I would say that spending more money on consultants is not where I want to go right now. I think for me, because we're going to have the transition to a new chief, that is going to help set the tone, and it's And there might be an opportunity, the word ad hoc is mentioned frequently up here, but to have some type of committee of maybe 2 council members, 2 members of the Formation Commission, the city administrator and the new police chief or others work to come together and see what we could get, and then come back. Because the new police chief is going to be the one that's going to have to work with them, because our chief is retiring. And the other thing I do want to say is that there's another side, and I think this is where I'm not going to speak for our chief, but this is where my understanding of just conversations and following this process and just looking at the national narrative, and it came up during our budget, is that if we really want to have the type of police department that our police are working with the community, with the most vulnerable, the most marginalized, we need the highest caliber of officers we can get. And the national narrative right now is hurting recruiting everywhere, and it's hurting the types of officers that we want because people aren't coming into the profession. And we just heard it at the budget presentation. We used to have hundreds of applicants for just a few jobs. Now we're down to a few dozen. And we can't recruit quick enough to fill the positions. You factor in the cost of housing, and that anyone that commutes, there's multiple police departments that are much closer to their home no matter where they come from. And so you have a revolving door of police officers from other communities who commute, who we train them, and then eventually they go to their communities. That hurts our community too, because police officers don't have the time served here to build up relationships within the neighborhoods and get to know the community. And so I want to say that I thank all of our officers in the Santa Barbara Police Department, because we have a great police department. And right now, I just don't know where we go when the entire commission, not all of them, but everyone that spoke, said don't pass this today. And so for me, I'm not able to vote on anything right now. I think at this point, we probably do need to wait till we get a new police chief and then have some type of council discussion on how we work with the new police chief, work with the leadership of the Formation Commission, and see where we go, rather than starting throwing dollars out in there. So just very disappointed that this is where it's come, and I respectfully disagree that we are closer than we were a month ago.
Ms. Gutierrez.
I am very frustrated and disappointed to hear during public comment that many of the CFC members did not agree with the proposal. And I understand why. I've never considered myself a politician, but I am now with this role, and I'm gonna own it now. I think that this became very political when politicians couldn't stand in their power and actually make decisions. This is very dear to my heart. I do not want to wait for the new police chief because I don't know the priorities of the new police chief. I think that there was a lack of communication. I think that the CFC members understand that we can't create a new commission, and they're willing to work with the district attorney's office to form that ordinance. I think from what I heard is that they just want certain things to be adapted. I'm not ready to vote on this right now. I'm really frustrated because we're losing focus on the main issues. For me, the big priorities are how are we going to get this information to the community, and how are we going to make sure that the most vulnerable, the ones that we're supposed to be fighting for, are actually going to be feeling comfortable filling out this form, and they're going to fill out the form correctly. That's my biggest priority. Second is the review process. Is the review process going to be fair? But I'm also very clear about our budget, and that hasn't been hidden from the public. I'm very concerned that we're losing the chief by the end of the month because he's played a critical role, and he's been working for the county for a very long time. We don't know if this other chief that we're going to get in a couple months, if they're from outside of Santa Barbara or outside from the state. I do not want to start all over. Because as we're sitting here and we continue having these conversations, there's still issues in the community. There's still people in the community that still feel that they're unheard. But we also have police officers out there in the community working their butts off, trying to build that trust. And as leaders, we're not backing them up. So I think we've done amazing work on both sides. We have to, I think, have another conversation and adapt some of these recommendations to see if they're even legally to adapt. But I do not want to wait for this new chief. I don't want to wait. I think we need to propose today that both city staff and the CFC members come to a meeting and they propose new recommendations to council. And we meet in 2 more weeks. But I do not want to see the chief leave until this comes back to council. Because I think the CSC members, their concerns that they had today, I think we can work with them. I think they're very aware with the limitations that we currently have. It's just, I think there was miscommunication. I think it can be fixed, but we have to stay focused on the 2 main issues. How do we get those forms out there in the community, and how do we keep a fair process in reviewing those forms? Because this is all busy work, and we have to finalize it as soon as possible.
Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would echo the frustrated and disappointed words from Mr. Friedman. I also think it's a heck of a lost opportunity. You know, Gabe, I want to thank you for breakfast to go over this multiple times. I really appreciate it. But equating disagreement with not taking recommendations seriously is, I don't think, what anybody is about up here, sitting here. I think everybody takes everything that came out of the Formation Commission very seriously, with a little different perspective. I know that for a fact, my perspective versus your perspective. I will never have your perspective. But I think also just looking at the broad scape and scope of the city and what it means to apply some type of recommendations that will work. I think you discount both the product and you discount the reception of the product when you say they weren't taken seriously. And I too agree that I'm at a loss of where to go today. I find Ms. Harmon's suggestions very seductive, as usual. But I don't know that it'll get anywhere. I'm conscious of a light at the end of the tunnel when we lose a police chief that I think is a once-in-a-lifetime value to this process, and we don't have that involved in the equation anymore. So I'm really not sure where I want to go. I don't know if I want to go backwards. I don't know if I want to go forwards, but I'm not happy with where I am. We could run this back to the CFC to dialogue with the people that we can put in the room for talking about the current recommendations. I don't know what you do when those come out of there, other than this is why it's an advisory board. They advise, and we get to sit up here and sweat and figure out what to do. I am intrigued by the year 1 consultant, other than the money. I love the person in the position, but I think, just like you said, everybody can use help. I don't know that that suffices. And then I'm actually just ignorant on what is called a framework. I would call it a trigger. What would be a trigger for an automatic route to an independent investigation? That type of I don't know anything about it, and I'd have to learn more about that and how that black and white language would work with all the nuances of whatever could come up. So that's kind of, if we were talking about trying to move forward or backwards today, those are my concerns. If somehow we went forward today, the easy part of this for me is entirely recasting the membership of the commission. I think we talked about expanding it with a charter option in 2024, so expanding it to 7, televising as soon as possible. Whatever we have sitting on that commission now, I would just pull the plug on it and work for a January recasting of 5 to become 7 in another year after that, and with the new roles and responsibilities. And I'm certain, in my heart, I'm certain that there are people out there who would have applied for it in this go-round if they'd known that it was being retasked with enhanced duties. So I don't know. I don't really have a way out. I mean, I have a way out of this, but I don't think the way would be popular. I have another way out of this, and it just seems like we're just going back and chasing our tail again. So I don't really have a lot to offer in this. And, you know, if I listen to the comments, I don't even know that I'm supposed to have a lot to offer to this, which is unfortunate. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor
Ms.
Oz,
Harmon?
if I may, would you be willing to invite your police chief to make a quick comment? It might be helpful to your deliberations.
Chief, if you would, please.
Thank you. I will confine this remarks to a very narrow scope. There has been some discussion in the public forum about what my departure date was, assuming that this council and the city administrator would like me to stay beyond July 1st. If it will expedite this process, I will do that. I would like to not stay too much longer beyond July 1st. But I do believe that we are close. In fact, I can assure you that none of you on this dais are as disappointed or as confused as I am, because almost every recommendation that was made was incorporated in this. But leaving that aside, if there is some belief that the only thing standing between getting us to a place where you all have something that you can live with is an arbitrary July 1st departure date, I will extend that.
Thank you, Chief. Chief, while I've got you up there, just a quick question, please, to go in, because there's something has come up in many comments about what triggers or what brings on a certain level of investigation outside of the normal department protocols.
This discussion was one of several that came out of meetings that occurred after April 22nd, and that's part of my frustration. But the threshold for that does need to be determined. It probably needs to be determined by the commission. There was reference to state law, which now has decertification. I'm drawing a blank on the number, but there are certain violations of law that will result in you being decertified as a police officer. And so the thought was that if a complaint against an officer was at that level, when I say that, then it would go to this outside investigation. The challenge is to identify the specifics, which I agree is absolutely critical that we do that. But for example, one of the violations that can get you decertified is a sustained complaint for dishonesty. That doesn't necessarily need, something like that doesn't necessarily need to go outside. So that's where I think the working group needs to sit down and figure out, okay, what are the criteria for when these go to an outside agency, because they are not inexpensive. But I do think they're necessary, and we have a history of doing them, particularly if it's something that either touches high-ranking people, as was mentioned, or has departmental-wide implications where there's a sense that maybe nobody can fairly and conduct an objective investigation.
Thank you, Chief. Ms. Harmon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for indulging me one more time. And I very much appreciate that, Chief. I hope you texted Mrs. Malakian about that. And glad to hear that you are in agreement that having the commission participate in that threshold trigger development potentially is a good idea. I think that's great. Sounds like we're all in agreement on that point. I just wanted to say, I think the absolute worst outcome for today would be for us to leave this meeting with this having been relegated to the circular filing bin. You know, I mean, I don't want nothing to happen out of this, and it sounds to me like that's the path we're on, leaving it very amorphous. Maybe we'll come back at some point in the future. I mean, to me, that is truly undermining the work of the commission that's been done, because I don't know that we'll have another opportunity to sit up here and talk about this again. I don't. So for me, what I would love to see, and here's what I propose, we'll see if there is any appetite for this. Thank you for indulging me, Mr. Mayor, is that we move forward with this process today with the revisions that I suggested, using the ARPA money for an independent monitor professional to work in consultation with Ms. Anderson, a recasting of the Fire and Police Commission, tasking them with working with the chief and various professionals to develop the threshold trigger for outside investigation. And then I think importantly, requiring in some manner that the CFC have specific input opportunity in connection with ordinance development. That may be the opportunity for them to give feedback about how this works through the development of the ordinance. And I realize that's asking our city attorney's office to do quite a bit more work, so I apologize. But I think it gets at maybe the discomfort that we're all feeling about needing more feedback for the CFC. It moves this forward in a way that I think is on some middle ground. And importantly to me, doesn't see this conversation end today. So that is what I propose. I'd be interested to hear from colleagues if there's interest in moving forward in that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harmon. I'm going to make my comments now, so it's time for me to irritate everybody. I wasn't up on this dais when this thing was formed and conceived, and in fact, I was approached by the former mayor about joining the CFC, but the problem was, as I was asked and I was looked at it, there was no scope, no mission, no alignment with what they were supposed to do, just a reaction to the pressures at the time. And in fact, that alignment never really happened from this body. Fortunately, NACOL was able to work with the commission. Fortunately, the chief and Officer Hill were able to work with the commission. But it was an unfair task. The commission did a mountain of work. There's no question about that. And I applaud the effort, and I agree with many of the findings, and many of the findings are in fact incorporated in the recommendations today. But we started out with not a rogue agency. We were not every police department. I've worked with 4 different police chiefs now, and I've worked closely with them, and I've worked with a lot of the officers in the field on ride-alongs, walk-alongs, on a brick bench with at the time, Officer Butel, Officer Corbett. And I have a feeling for what this department was, what this department is, and what it continues to be, and who they strive to be in the future. And it doesn't align with a lot of the things we've talked about today. There are some bad things that have gone out there in the world. This is an exceptional department. This department's ability to do community policing is probably a textbook for the way the things should be around the country, as far as I'm concerned. I know that every community is not like Santa Barbara. And in terms of inclusion and diversity, this department's diversity, if you look at our makeup, is more diverse than the community, if you want to look at things that way. But that's not really the point. I don't think it's fair to ask the CFC to reconvene, to rehash this thing over either. I believe we'd had a hearing. We've heard from them. They've heard from us. We've gone back and forth. A lot of great ideas were exchanged. A lot of ideas that aren't going to fly were exchanged. But the idea that we're going to keep tweaking this and try to get it to another level. We're going to add an ordinance to this if we go ahead and move with these recommendations about the Fire and Police Commission. And I agree with the redoing of the Fire and Police Commission. But I've been to a lot of Fire and Police Commission meetings. I was the citizen there. And usually it was about a noise complaint or whatever. They haven't been that active because frankly, there hasn't been a lot of cause to be active. And I worked with when Chief Sanchez was here on a couple of investigations that where I was able to be a part of what happened. And so I've gotten to see some of that. And I've become more and more impressed. And I really feel like for the people that we ask, we compensate, we ask, and we expect to stand up for us every day, that occasionally this council stands up for those same people. So I am prepared to go through with these today. The Office of Independent Review, the consultant, that's where we should have started. If we had started there, it would have been a lot easier for the CFC to figure out what we wanted. We gave them an impossible task, and they did amazing work with what we gave them, but it wasn't great direction. So now we're going to do it kind of backwards, but I understand the need to do that. What I don't understand is the need to bring this back. I don't understand the need to rehash this. Yeah, I'd like to keep Chief Malecki around for a little while longer, but not because we're tying him to the stable here. He is the man to bring us to fruition in this cause. And we'd be fools to let this opportunity go by. So please, let's move forward. Let's continue to be this great police department. Let's make the positive light out there that says, I want to be a cop in Santa Barbara. And I realize this is a nationwide thing. It's not just us that's having these recruiting problems right now. But it's tough to live here. It's tough to pay for housing here. All the things that people have to go through. But I'm going to tell you right now, we got great people on the street. Let's recognize that, and let's continue to recognize that. Thank you. Ms. Snedden, and then Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. So I was listening to KCLU this morning, and they were talking about the LA elections and the tension, and something that stuck out to me that they said was that they were hearing from voters from the community that they want both increased patrols, and that's, we've had in these last 3 years George Floyd, but also COVID and increased crime and homelessness and real calls and appreciation for the work of law enforcement. So they were saying that there's both the call for increased patrols and a genuine call for reform in how policing is done. That doesn't mean it's done wrong. It doesn't mean that our local force has a particular problem. It just means that it could be done in a different way, or maybe a little better in some ways once it's looked at. This is statewide. This isn't just countrywide, and I'm not going to extend myself beyond my borders that I know, but in Santa Barbara and in Los Angeles, in California, there continues to be a tension between those two calls. And those tensions aren't either or. It's not different people calling for those things. It's the same person calling for both increased quality, progressive policing, to Mayor Rouse's point, and we have really high caliber officers, but also that it's not mutually exclusive from meaningful reform. And it's not just us sitting here who want that. Some of us up here sitting here who want that. It's not just the community that's calling for it. It's not just those who served on the CFC. This is statewide. This is nationwide. We're at a moment where we could really be in collaboration and really talking with each other and getting input and making it the best it could be. We could be a leading model in that. I don't want to truncate this process. I don't want to say, well, we tried it, didn't work, and we're done. I want to see it keep going, and I want to see it be truly collaborative, and that's what I hear from our chief. He's willing to stay on longer out of retirement. That's what I hear from members of the CFC. That's what I hear from us up here. That's what I hear from staff. Like, when they came to us, it was like, well, maybe this could work to address those needs. I'm actually relieved to hear that it's just as sort of stunning that it's not as well received from those who proposed it as well. It seems like there's room for conversation. So I think what I would like to do is definitely move forward with the audit. That seems like that cart should have been put before our horse, or after, or however that goes. We did it in the wrong order, and I think that audit still needs to happen. And until that happens, it's really hard to know whether these recommendations or those recommendations match the need of what's being audited. And that's been something that's been used to discredit this process. Well, it doesn't meet our community needs. It's also been used to say that we're not listening. And how can we listen if we don't know all the information? So I think everyone benefits from information. I'm a big advocate for transparent, open information. Let's do the audit. Then after the audit, have any recommendations go back to, come back to council after that audit. I would like, I'm on the ordinance committee. There are several of us on the ordinance committee. I'm not going to feel any more comfortable putting forward an ordinance with ordinance changes if it didn't have the support of CFC. So however that support comes and conversations, I don't see the point of starting the ordinance work until we've had the audit and until we've had the real input of the CFC on these recommendations. I do think there's a framework within the Fire and Police Commission. It's really could be much more influential than it is. I think we have to really just recreate our vision of what that commission is and give it more influence and authority. And be within that framework, I think the CFC could make concise recommendations to, within that framework, how can we make it work? I think that seems to be pragmatically what we're looking at, as opposed to, I'm a little bit nervous up here thinking like, are we going to do nothing at all? And that doesn't seem like a reasonable outcome for all of this work either. So I think let's do the audit. Let's then bring that back to CFC, or maybe CFC at the same time. I don't know, but without the audit, I don't know that we know what we're dealing with. And within this framework, what those recommendations could be. Maybe that could happen before the chief retires. Maybe it goes to CFC and you get within this framework, but until there's the audit, it's hard for me to see what to recommend. But I don't think I'm not going to speak for anybody else. Several of us up here have expressed that we don't want to see this just die and won't let it, actually. So I'll leave it at that. Let's commit to the audit. And then I would like to see any ordinance work go back to CFC first, so that the ordinance committee can feel confident that the ordinance is actually addressing the recommendations.
Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I, as well, don't want to leave this meeting without something being brought forward. I think the CFC did enough research in this issue than all of us put together. So just to keep my comments short, I want to make a motion to approve Ms. Harmon's recommendations as she listed earlier. And Ms. Harmon, if you can recite them, please.
Motion, please. Is that a motion, Ms. Harmon, or you didn't really make a motion, but I guess, would you?
I'm making the motion. I just
Okay.
want her to restate the
All right,
her
very good.
points.
Mr. Gutierrez?
Would be that we move forward with the staff recommendation. In addition to the recommendation, require that at least 1 year contract is undertaken with an independent monitor professional to assist with the upstanding of the auditor monitor functions of Ms. Anderson's role. that we require a total reconstituting of the Fire and Police Commission, that we task the commission with working with our police chief and our staff professionals in developing a threshold trigger for outside investigations, and that we work with whatever members of the CFC who are still available, understanding that it's no longer a constituted commission, in developing the ordinance in a formal way before that gets to the ordinance committee. That would be my suggestion. And I'll just add, I do very much appreciate the suggestion to move forward with the audit only, but it does feel to me very much like just going backwards, and so I can't support doing only that today.
Ms. Harmon, quick clarification. So the threshold for investigation or getting that, is that something that could be handled within the ordinance language for the Fire and Police Commission? And that may be a question for the city attorney, I don't know.
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Harmon, we can absolutely do that with the commission, work with the police department, and develop protocol standards. Just for example, top of my head, like what triggers it, like depending on a certain level of rank, if there's an appearance of internal conflict throughout, or if, for example, the independent monitor, disagrees with the police chief's decision, something like that. So we can definitely work on language and create a specific, that would be probably something that eventually be put into an ordinance too, so.
But just as you make your motion, Mr. Gutierrez, I was just trying to look at the staff recommendations and what we're accepting or rejecting as we go forward. So if you could construct something along those lines, that'd be great. Thank you.
I'll second that.
Everyone's confused. So let's, first up was Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I have a couple questions. One's for Ms. Harmon. I want to make sure, whichever one of you is making the motion, that you said adopt those recommendations also. So part of the motion is to accept the staff recommendations.
Those plus.
Plus, yep, okay, got that. And then I think I'd like to hear from staff on both the, you're giving me your money look. I'm not so concerned about the money. I think we can find the money. But I'm concerned about the dynamics of our structure with the new position internally and working with a consultant and the CFC participation in the ordinance development. Could somebody just talk about their feelings on that?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Jordan, I would be very surprised if Ms. Anderson wouldn't welcome the assistance of expert to make the initial work. And I will defer to her to answer, but I do not see a problem with that dynamic. I think it would be a jump start.
Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Jordan, I agree wholeheartedly. So I have not only consulted with Nicole, read up on every report that I possibly could read up on. I also have experience doing audits of departments, community assessments. I've worked with multiple emergency management agencies and doing assessments of those agencies. I welcome that advice, that guidance through consultation. And I've also committed in writing to members of the CFC to continue coordination and collaboration with them, specifically on identifying the threshold for third-party investigations.
Okay, good enough for me. Thank you.
Ms. Snedden, go ahead. Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead. I appreciate wanting to keep this going. I think it is those recommendations that are objectionable. So even with that and language, I can't support today, and I'll leave it at that. Well, I'll add one more thing. I think just in clarification, because this goes ahead with the duties going to the Fire and Police Commission and then drafting ordinance language. And I think those are the things that CFC should give input to on what that structure might be and how that might work better. So I think it's going ahead and approving it and then sort of taking away the negotiating process by saying, well, it's already approved that this is the structure, so then the input doesn't have as much influence. So I think I'd rather not move forward with the recommendations as laid out.
Okay, very good. Mr. Friedman, to the motion?
So just to clarify, once again, it's the recommendation that was on the staff report plus the assistance to Ms. Anderson's position. And what was there was additional that you mentioned in regards to input from the CFC, Ms. Harmon?
On the ordinance, yeah.
But that's as individuals not reconstituting it,
Well,
correct?
I mean, I leave
I
that
think we need to be
to-
specific, or do we need to be specific today on reconstituting? Is that a council action, or or can they just? Yeah, I just
That's a
want to
good
make sure
question.
that we
That's
have
a
to
good
take if we have to take a vote.
Mr. Colon, if you could address that, please.
I have reconstituting the commission here, but the council's also discussed just tasking individual members to work with the police chief.
If you could clarify which one of those two it is, that's all I need, because I think everything else I'm clear on.
Well, I mean, personally, I think I would like to reconstitute it, but I would imagine that the members themselves may have something to say about that. So to the extent they don't want to be reconstituted, then ideally they would be spoken to individually. I mean, this is where it's a little bit difficult to say, you know, their expectation is that their work is done. So they would probably need to be asked about their willingness to be reformed. At the very least, I would require through this motion that individuals who were members of the CFC who have a willingness to engage in a formal way do so. I don't know that it's quite fair to insist they engage. I don't know.
No, I get, so right now it's the individuals, make sure each member of the CFC is reached out to get their input on it going forward, so they all have the opportunity up front to discuss it going forward. But we're not officially reconstituting because we don't know what their time commitments are at this point.
Unless we can, I mean.
I'm sorry, were
No,
you talking about
I like that, what you said originally was each one of them gets reached out to individually, and then we can take that next step if we need to. So I'm supportive of that.
Ms. Gutierrez?
I have a quick question for Ms. Anderson. Ms. Sneddon mentioned about her priority to have an audit. In your recommendation, the presentation you talked about, the city staff having a priority to have an audit and the different areas that the audit would review. If we go ahead with the recommendations and the addition recommendations, when will the audit be done? Just for clarification for the public?
Mayor Russ and Councilmember Gutierrez, it was about 90 to 120 days was the estimation that we were given by the contractor.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion, but I'm not sure. I think I'd like to have it reread because I'm not really super clear on one point. So, Madam Clerk, are you prepared to reread it or to have one of these guys restate it? Or Mr. Colon?
Mr. Mayor and Council, I can give it a shot from Mayor Pro Tem Harmon's restating, and then we can work with it from there. Motion by Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Harmon, to adopt the staff recommendations, and in addition, 1, require at least a 1-year contract with an independent monitor professional to assist with the creation of the auditor functions. 2, reconstituting of the Fire and Police Commission. 3, task the commission with working with the police chief and staff professionals in developing threshold triggers for outside investigations. 4, provide staff direction to work with whichever members of the Community Formation Commission are still available in developing the ordinance in a formal way before it gets to the ordinance committee.
And then was the fourth, or the third bullet about the, was that included in your motion? About the auditor? Because I know we talked about the other consultant, but
Yes, that
Okay.
was. And I just want a point of order. Did you, Mayor Pro Tem Harmon, second the motion? Okay, thank you.
All right, is council clear on the motion? Wow, that's amazing. Ms. Gorman, may we have a roll call vote, please?
This is the motion by Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Harmon, as stated a moment ago, around 3:56 p.m. Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez.
Yes.
Councilmember Friedman.
Yes.
Councilmember Snedden.
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Harmon.
Yes.
Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez.
Aye.
Councilmember Jordan.
Yes.
Mayor Rouse.
Aye. Okay, that carries 6-1. And thank you all for participating today, and thank you once again to the CFC, and we are adjourned.
They can encroach on the property as stated. And I agree with and understand the Transportation Department because they're very much sticklers about keeping it set back from the property.
Mr. Chair, we're out of 2 minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry. So the final thing that I want to say, though, is that having a second story and encroaching setbacks is going to reduce daylight, airflow, which is important there, privacy, and obstruction of view, because there is right now an ocean view. Small as it is, we have an ocean view.